Turn this off. There we go.
Are you muted?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Bruce. As we gather together online this morning, let us remember that our church building stands on the traditional territory of the Iowa people, who call themselves Bahoye in their own language. Good morning. I'm Louise Alcorn, your service leader for today. Kelly Patterson is today's celebrant. Barb Martin is our song leader, and Bruce Martin is our pianist. Please keep your microphones muted during the entire service, and you are welcome to turn your cameras on. I'd love to see your smiling faces. We are recording this service, which will be available on our main Facebook page and our First Unitarian Church of Des Moines YouTube channel. After today's service, please feel free to turn on your microphone and camera and join us in coffee hour. We will be using virtual breakout rooms for coffee hour, which will not be recorded. And now I hand it over to Kelly.
We are starting our service today with our chalice lighting and our reading, which is number 658, which is called To Risk. To laugh is to appear risking the fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out for another is to risk exposing our true self. To place our ideas, our dreams before the crowd is to risk loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. To live is to risk dying. We'll be singing our gathering song, which is number 396. I know this rose will open. It will be in your chat line. We will sing this over twice. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines digital service. My name is Kelly Patterson. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the celebrant for this morning's service. Whether you are with us for the day or here for a lifetime, we are glad that you have chosen to join us online. Everyone is welcome to join us for a service, whether or not you live in Des Moines or have been physically here at the First Unitarian Church. Wherever you are, we hope that you find something here today to help you on your life's journey. We are excited to have Seto as our outreach partner for May and June. Seto continues to deliver free groceries weekly to 21 families around Des Moines Metro who are food insecure due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many Latinx families have lost their jobs and have limited access to support due to their immigration status. Half of your donation today will go to El Éxito.
Thank you, Kelly. So today, for our special music, we have a very special version of the Hymn of Valor. Many of you are familiar with the Hymn of Valor as we sing it at the end of many of our services. You may not be aware, however, that the Hymn of Valor was written for First Unitarian by Henry Adlard, who ministered here in the 1920s. Today's version was spearheaded by Bill Paxson and Karen Kramer with the enthusiastic and adventurous participation of choir members for whom this was a learning experience. So here's the video on the Hymn of Valor. Oh, thank you so much to Bill and Karen for bringing the choir together again. We all miss each other very much. All right, and now we will have a story for all ages, which is a book by a favorite author of mine, Mercer Mayer. It is being read by my pal, Penny Gunther. Sorry. Here's the story.
Hi, I'm Penny Gunther, and today we are going to be reading There's a Nightmare in My Closet, written and illustrated by Mercer Mayer. There used to be a nightmare in my closet. Before going to sleep, I always closed the closet door. I was even afraid to turn around and look. When I was safe in bed, I peeked. Sometimes. One night, I decided to get rid of my nightmare once and for all. As soon as the room was dark, I heard him creeping toward me. Quickly, I turned on the light and caught him sitting at the foot of my bed. "Go away, nightmare, or I'll shoot you," I said. I shot him anyway. My nightmare began to cry. I was mad, but not too mad. "Nightmare, be quiet or you'll wake Mommy and Daddy," I said. He wouldn't stop crying, so I took him by the hand and tucked him in bed and closed the closet door. I suppose there's another nightmare in my closet, but my bed's not big enough for 3.
Thank you, Penny. Appreciate that. Speaking of fear, and in the spirit of Reverend Amy, here is your offertory story for today. Timmy didn't want to put his money in the offering plate on Sunday morning, so his mother decided to get creative. "Oh, you don't want that money, honey," she whispered in his ear. "Quick, drop it in the plate. It's tainted." Horrified, the little boy obeyed. After a few seconds, he whispered, "But Mommy, why was the money tainted? Was it dirty?" "Oh, no, dear," she replied. "It's not really dirty. It just tain't yours and it tain't mine," she replied. "It's God's." So if you would like to help support First Unitarian Church of Des Moines and our Faith in Action partner, El Éxito, there is a link to give in the chat right now, or please go to our website at ucdsm.org and click on Give in the top bar on the front page. When the pull-down menu opens up, click on Online Giving and you can put in any amount you like to put in the basket. You can also choose to make a repeating gift. This is the digital version of passing the offering plate. And anything gathered here today goes 1/2 to El Éxito, and one half to support our church's social justice work overall. So the link should be in your chat right now. And now I'm going to hand it over to Bruce and Barb for the offertory song.
Although Sesame Street songs are written for children, they usually have a message for us all. And this one is a universal message about fear. I've a special secret children ought to know. It's about the mistakes, the little ones, that you make when you will grow. If you make a mistake, you should not start to cry. Mistakes are not so bad, and here is why. Oh, everyone makes mistakes, oh yes they do. Your sister and your brother, your dad and mother too. Big people, strong people, everyone that goes wrong, people. Everyone makes mistakes, why not you? If you make a mistake while counting up to 10, well, don't get mad, don't be sad, just start to count again. And if you should only get to 8 or 9, I'm still your friend, and I still like you fine. 'Cause everyone makes mistakes, oh yes they do. Your sister and your brother, your dad and mother too. Big people, little people, everyone, they're people. Everyone makes mistakes, so why not you? If you spill your milk or glass all over the floor, well, your mom and dad still like you just as much as they did before. 'Cause when mother and dad were just as small as you, I'll bet that they knocked over their milk too. 'Cause everyone makes mistakes. Oh.
Hey, wait a minute. I know a man who never admits to making mistakes. You know who I mean?
Oh, yes, they do. Your cousins and your neighbors, and my husband too. Short people, tall people, matter of fact, all people. So everyone makes mistakes, so why not you? If everyone in the whole wide world makes mistakes, then why not you? Me too.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you, Barb and Bruce. That was fabulous. All right, now our membership coordinator, Lyra Halston, is going to talk to us about the new UU class.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My internet seems to be lagging this morning. So if you are interested in becoming a member of First Unitarian, we are going to be having a membership class on next Sunday, June 28th, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. It will be hosted by Reverend Amy and I. It will be held on Zoom. So if you go to our website and sign up on our link, and I'll be putting the link in the chat, you can sign up. You can bring your lunch and eat with us and learn all about the history and theology of Unitarian Universalism, and we'll be talking about the history of the church and what is involved with joining our community. So the class is required for membership, and you will receive the Zoom link after you register. So if you have any questions, I'll also be putting my email address in the chat, and I hope that Reverend Amy and I will see you on the 28th. Also, if you have not already received or returned your survey questions that was sent out earlier this week about the information that we're needing to update our database, please do so as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Lyra. As a community of human hands and human hearts, we come together here to share our laughter and our tears, and to bear witness and minister to one another as we struggle with life's challenges. We especially hold in love anyone who is grieving or heavy-hearted today. In particular, we hold in love anyone struggling to overcome the deep-seated fears that keep us from being our whole selves. Let us bring into this moment anyone we know who could use some special care and attention. As we say their names aloud or silently, or type them into the chat function, may the love of this community hold them all. Within our community and across the wider world, there are people who are denied their inherent worth and dignity because of some fact of their inherent humanity. May the work of our hands and our hearts support and comfort all those who are marginalized, oppressed, silenced, or at risk. And may we be called to compassionate action by the needs of those who struggle against violence, degradation, and destruction. May our light shine on the broken places of the world, and may we journey in solidarity with all those who fight for equity and justice in human relations. I send special thoughts to our brothers and sisters who seek to make Black lives matter. May those who are grieving be comforted. May those who are tired find rest. May the broken places be healed. May those who are filled with joy and laughter be abundant. Now we light 3 candles. One for the joys and concerns we have shared by name. One for the names we have spoken or put into the chat. And a final candle for all of the joys and all of the concerns which are deeply held but remain unspoken here today.
Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul.
This is from the Courage to Change, from the Al-Anon program. I suspect that if I reclaimed all the minutes, hours, and days I've sacrificed to worry and fear, I'd add years to my life. When I succumb to worry, I open a Pandora's box of terrifying pictures, paranoid voices, and relentless self-criticism. The more attention I pay to the mental static, the more I lose my foothold in reality. To break the cycle of worry and fear, I'm learning to focus all my attention on this very moment. Instead of running away, I'm learning to look at the source of my distress. As a result, I find that pain passes much more quickly, and what I gain is freedom from fear. When I was avoiding taking risks, fear was always with me, just over my shoulder. Now I go through it and come out the other side. often unscathed. I no longer have to keep watch for potential dangers. Instead, I can occupy myself with living.
For our meditation, I ask you to consider what fears hold you back. What fears have you overcome? How do you, as the reading said, occupy yourself with living? Please join me in a silent moment of thought, meditation, or prayer.
Our second reading is by Stephen Schick, Loving in Fear. Spirit of life, God of love, grant me the courage to love boldly in the face of my greatest fears. Grow me in your wisdom and let my actions speak when silence threatens justice and indifference disturbs peace. When gossip, hate, and cruelty arise among friends or in public places, help me bravely walk forward with love. When I defensively assert certainty in the presence of the unknown, grant me the courage to live comfortably in the unanswerable questions of life. Bless me with the eternal gift of not knowing and let it take root in me until it pushes forth shoots of understanding and branches of humility. Our next song is When I Am Frightened. It's number 1012 in case you have a hymnal. The words will be in your chat box, and we are singing the first verse only.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care.
Thank you, Barb and Bruce. It was beautiful. Good morning. My name is Louise Alcorn. I'm a member here at First Unitarian. I'm happy to be addressed as she, her, hers, or hey, Wheezy. I did a version of this service twice back in 2004. Some of you long-timers may remember that I was famously interrupted by folk singer for the first time I did this service. If you buy me a beer, I'll tell you the whole story. Today's topic, as it was in 2004, is fear. Such a grim topic for a nice summer service, which is so unlike me. But before you think I've entirely lost my sense of humor, my original title was A Culture of Fear, or Why the World Needs a 12-Step Program. It's true. And just as in 2004, we have a lot that seems to be making us afraid. I'm going to start with a favorite proverb which my mother found for me many years ago. That the birds of worry or care fly above your head, this you cannot change. But that they build nests in your hair, this you can prevent. We will get back to the birds, I promise. For some years, I've had a theory, this I believe, if you will. It's heavily influenced by 12-step programs like AA and Al-Anon, and as in the reading that Kelly gave earlier. The theory goes something like this: that any decisions we make as individuals, as families, as communities, or as nations, I like to think big, that any decisions we make that are based primarily on fear, or on fear's playmates, anger and hatred, these decisions never turn out well. They are not healthy and do not have healthy outcomes. Whatever short-term benefits we might imagine, they are rarely lasting or ultimately conducive to personal or corporate growth and happiness. That's me, thinking big since the early noughts. So, fear. Being a librarian, my first step was to look up some definitions of fear. So, fear, noun. A feeling of agitation and anxiety caused by the presence or imminence of danger. Okay. A feeling of disquiet or apprehension, as in a fear of looking foolish. Yeah. Extreme reverence or awe as toward a supreme power. Not popular amongst Unitarians. Transitive verb, to be afraid or frightened of, to expect. To be uneasy or apprehensive about, as in feared the test results. Yeah. Okay, so synonyms. There's some goodies here. Fright, dread, terror, horror, panic, alarm, dismay, consternation, trepidation. So lest you should think I have found or plan to present here today some magic formula for avoiding fear, sorry, no. I happen to have a fear of heights, fear of flying, and even a fear of birds. Yeah. And also those often conflicting fears of intimacy and loneliness, change and stagnation, all the biggies. Oh yeah, and that public speaking thing. Yeah. Worst of all, sometimes I'm just terrified that my fears will keep me from taking productive risks, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy if ever there was one. I think the most debilitating aspect of fear is what we do, or perhaps more importantly, what we don't do because we are afraid. I think of these as our fear behaviors. Some of our toughest fears have to do with interactions with other people. Whenever they do those studies on fears and phobias, what comes out above flying, water, fire, or even birds is the fear of public speaking. Also high on that list is meeting new people. Those of you who know me may not believe it, but I was actually a shy kid. I think lots of people describe themselves that way. It's not unusual, but I think there are levels of shyness, some more debilitating than others. Mine was of the middling bad variety. Once I'd met people and they didn't outright reject me, I did fine, but cold introduction had me frozen in my sneakers. So I can't pinpoint the exact moment when I decided that shyness was ruining my life and keeping me from joy. And I probably didn't put it that way at the time. Ultimately, it was probably because of Carol. She was my best friend in junior high and was cripplingly shy, despite being very smart. I realized that if we were going to do anything fun, one of us had to learn to risk rejection. So I did. Small steps at first, a simple, awkward, "Can we join you?" But soon it was second nature. Now I'm a complete pushy broad, for better or worse, and have met some extraordinary people in wonderfully random places. So thank you, Carol. Oh, excuse me. One moment. So what does it mean to be afraid? I like to point out that not all fear is obstructive or debilitating. So there are rational fears. Remember those definitions. A feeling of anxiety caused by the presence or imminence of danger. Straightforward. Fear can be a survival tool. I mean, it's entirely reasonable to fear the grizzly bear. Giving the bear a big hug and telling it that you respect its right to bareness will not keep you alive. Run, preferably up a tree. We have evolved a strong survival instinct, but that doesn't always serve us well in the modern world. The bear is easy to suss out, But fear of rejection, fear of the other, those are hard. And figuring out what we do or don't do because of these more subtle fears is equally tricky. So back in 2004, I had already chosen this topic when my father gave me an essay he'd recently written called The Anger Virus. In it, he reflected in a slightly different context, almost exactly what I had been trying to enunciate about my fear concept. Oddly enough, the essay is written in the format of a letter to his kids, so this is truly fatherly advice. He says, "The main obstacle between us and a good life is anger. A close second, perhaps, is irrational fear, which is often tangled up with anger. Rational fear from imminent violence or life-threatening disease, for example, is obviously debilitating, but not persistent. The way to deal with anger is to recognize it, understand it, and minimize it. So what's a good life? One in which you have frequent opportunity to experience joy. One where you continually develop your understanding of self, the human condition, and your connection to the universe." Can you tell that my dad was a UU? Obviously, I would argue that anger is simply a manifestation of underlying fear, rather than the other way around. But the result remains much the same. A good life is one in which you can achieve personal growth and experience the joy that is offered. The main internal barrier to this is fear, or anger, or hatred, or any of those synonyms from the dictionary. What you might call external barriers to joy can include illness, accident, or temporary circumstance. You can only rarely do anything about these barriers. Fear, on the other hand, is something you can recognize, understand, and minimize, as Dad said. As the proverb I quoted earlier asserts, that the birds of worry or care fly above your head, this you cannot change, but that they build nests in your hair, this you can prevent. The birds of worry or care. It's odd that birds keep coming into this. I mentioned earlier my fear of birds. Feel free to laugh. I can't hear you anyways. It is a bit laughable, but I just can't stand the stupid things. It's the fluttering. Yeah. I also hate to fly on airplanes. I hate it. I do it, but I hate it. I get all tense. I mean, my knees clench, right? So what are my choices? I could stay home, never fly anywhere, and avoid large cities where pigeons are plentiful. But is this what I want? Will this give me a good life, a life where I have the chance to experience joy? Nope. Since I was a girl, I've had a daft little dream of sitting quietly in a piazza somewhere in Europe, sipping a beverage and watching the world go by. So I used the formula my father described: recognize, understand, and minimize. I recognized that my fear of flying was not, as everyone assumes, a fear of crashing, but rather a combination of memories of very bad flights in my past, a general fear of loss of control, that's a biggie, as well as some genuine physical discomfort. I understood that none of these things were truly debilitating unless I let them be. So, some mild pharmaceuticals, a 9-hour flight, and about 4 countries later, I found myself in 2002 in Venice, in the Piazza San Marco, sitting at a table with a drink, watching the overheated tourists, the pickpockets and the gondoliers, admiring St. Mark's and the Doge's palace, while the bored waiters beat off the thousands of pigeons that congregate there every day. It's a memory I will never lose and wouldn't trade for any amount of imagined security. So that particular flock of worry and care can find someplace else to roost. So where do our fears come from? Oddly enough, those definitions I mentioned earlier don't actually list any causes of fear except awe of a supreme power, which I don't think explains my fear of flying. Or might be birds. Back to my bird phobia. My mother has been afraid of birds my whole life. Although we can both point to early experience that informed that fear, real experiences, I have to ask, am I afraid for the same reasons as she? Because they are murder dinosaurs and they mean to kill us. Let's get real. Or am I afraid because she was afraid and I unconsciously reflected that? It's impossible to tell at this point, and it hardly matters. We both recognize and minimize the fear as far as we can. We even laugh about it a lot, and that's enough. My father made an argument that the negative messages we carry inside ourselves can come from those around us, who often, without meaning to, give us these recurring messages. Again, he was discussing anger, but the metaphor works. He said, anger, like irrational fear, is stuck in the past. It has roots in all those bad things that happened to us, often long ago and usually forgotten by everyone except ourselves. Miserable childhoods, abusive relationships, uncaring parents, raw deals of all varieties, all real stuff. I continue to see many people carrying these things around like permanent backpacks, just waiting to be reopened so they can spill out yet again. Far too often, the contents get spilled onto children and the old events infect a new generation. We become carriers of the anger virus, infecting those who are close to us. This virus is especially adept at wiping out opportunities for joy. I think this works for a fear virus as well. We can unknowingly pass the virus on. Think of the TikTok that Reverend Amy showed a couple of weeks ago of the young man explaining quite simply what his mother had told him to do and not do to survive as a young Black man in the world. How much of his subsequent behavior was a reaction to fear, either his or his mother's? Although the title of my talk is What Are We Afraid Of?, I've mostly discussed internal, personal fears. However, there's quite another source that is both subtle and also totally in our faces all the time. We do live in a culture of fear. Fear is a great motivator and also a great manipulator. These messages aren't just in families. If we are told over and over again that going into the city will get us killed, what are the chances we'll go downtown to see a show? What effect will this ultimately have on that city's urban life? It's all based in fear. More broadly, if we're convinced, told even, that a group of people mean us harm, what are the chances that we'll reach out to them? And what will this reticence do to our relations with our neighbors? That fear is playing out everywhere right now. Fear often based in nameless, untraceable paths of thinking going back generations. So many backpacks. Right now, while thousands point out injustice, a perfectly human, fear-based reaction is to worry about what this means for my life, for my comfort and security. That's simply human, but we need to step past the fear and ask the right questions. We need to acknowledge the culture of fear that exists for others because of the status quo that might be comfortable for us. Amy exhorted us a couple weeks ago to take a risk out of our comfortable shell, moving towards justice. To do this, we have to overcome our fears. Fears of loss of security, of change, even of rejection. We miss opportunities for joy and growth and understanding when we are limited or even frozen by our fears. So, as this fear theory of mine has been building up, I've become more attuned to the messages of fear around me. I spent a couple of evenings watching primetime television, heaven help me, and I really watched those commercials with a critical eye to the fear messages. So in one evening of primetime viewing, I was encouraged to fear going bald, my digestion, too much acid, too little fiber, my hair, is it brittle, does it shine? My car's tires, are they good enough? Will I skid and kill someone? Will they carry my children safely? And I don't even have children. Bad breath, body odor, being fat. This came up no less than 4 times in one evening. And last but by no means least, I should fear for the safety of my home from burglars, carbon monoxide, and termites. It made me want to run screaming into the street where I might have been hit by a car with bald tires. And then there are other political ads. You know, we live in Iowa, we see them all the time. The Democrats want to spend all your hard-earned money. The Republicans want to get your children killed for oil. This candidate is lying to you. That candidate is lying. And then there's the news. Right now, it's particularly hard. There's a pandemic. The pandemic is a hoax. Looters are in your neighborhood. What? So I'm not implying that advertisers or politicians invented fear as a motivator. They simply harness and exploit it for their own purposes. They know, as we should all be aware, but each of us has emotional hit points, which can be triggered by subliminal stimuli and some well-chosen words. Our current political environment is all about hitting these emotional points. It always has been, really, but it's particularly bad now. 2004 had phrases like axis of evil and weapons of mass destruction, right? Which seem quaint compared to the nonstop barrage of right now of wacko people and stupid this and fake that, right? So how do these hit points affect us as a community? I think we can all agree that there is intense narcissism in our current leadership. Narcissism is informed at base by a fear of not being liked, of not being the constant center of attention. And although we can laugh at the buffoon, ultimately that level of fear-based behavior at leadership level has serious, even deadly consequences in the national environment. When everyone is an other because they are not tremendous, how can you ever create community? When every reasonable criticism is an attack or fake news, how can you learn and grow? A national environment where we create policy based on fear, where we gas our own people on the off chance they might have a point, where we put children behind bars because they are other, where we threaten our friends just to look bigly. None of this is healthy. It's fear-based and can't lead to creative, healthy solutions. I know we've had enough anger recently to last a lifetime, but anger is so often an extension and expression of fear. It's so easy to make a soundbite out of fear and anger because we all live with these emotions. It feels like truth. I think there's a question that we need to include in the national dialogue whenever we're deciding something. Are we, as a nation, as a people, acting primarily out of fear? Some of the recent remarkable pieces on white fragility and privilege do ask this question, which is an excellent start. I talked earlier about overcoming my smaller fears, shyness, birds, airplanes. But how do we overcome our cultural fears so that we can make good decisions and allow ourselves to experience growth and joy as a whole healthy community? My dad had an idea. He asked, what about anger at blatant injustice, greed, or arrogance? Real achievers take note of these evils and set about challenging them. This is similar to what Amy said the last few weeks. The rest of us too often just stay angry, unable to take useful action. Sometimes the successful action is not a confrontation, but an end run along a new creative path. How can we keep the birds, the vultures of worry and fear from roosting in our society? There's that basic formula: recognize, understand, and minimize. Be aware of the fear messages. Recognize the emotional hit points they're aiming for. Understand our own reactions to those messages, and then minimize the hurtful, damaging actions, or lack of action, that our own fears can cause. I would argue that the peaceful protests we are seeing right now, the intense, if painful discussions we're finally having, are creative methods for facing and naming our cultural fears. They might even be part of Henry Nelson Wyman's creative interchange, which we've talked about a lot in this church, leading us to better understanding. To contrast, we could also argue that the fires and looting and lynchings are also expressions of fear, both real and imagined, but are neither creative nor productive. I know there would be some argument on whether they're productive, but I worry that they come from fear. I suspect that how we choose to understand, confront, and express our fears will determine in large part who we are as a people and in community. I've been facing my own white fragility in recent years. I've also been facing my own mortality with the onset of COVID. A whole host of new fears confront us right now. I try to ask myself, am I facing them honestly and constructively? And with a sense of humor, because that's how I roll. So I appreciate you listening to me today. I want to leave you with one final thought. I've talked about my little theory that decisions based on fear don't turn out well. Let me give you in closing the flip side of that theory. That those decisions that we make primarily out of healthy caring, affection, or love are far more likely to lead to growth and joy. When we reach out without fear to another human, when we stand on the side of love, we reject fear as an obstruction and offer ourselves an opportunity for joy. And remember that the birds of worry or care fly above your head. This you cannot change. But that they build nests in your hair, this you can prevent. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. That was awesome. Okay. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of love, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of community. Let its continuing light burn away your fears and leave you open to joy. We will sing our last song this morning, which is number 1015. I Know I Can, and we'll sing the whole thing through.
Thank you, Barb and Bruce. I love that one. This final reading is by Tanya Marquez. It's called Do Not Fear Agitation. Do not fear agitation, for agitation is the rhythm of life itself, to be put into motion, to be stirred. Do not fear the movements that decenter what you always thought permanent. You carry within the center of your understanding the compass to show you the way. Carry with you the love that will hold you, the vision that will guide you, the relationships to all beings in the world that will ground you. Go in peace and in gentle agitation to stir this world to the side of love. Thank you, everyone.